Welcome back to Endless Tangents. This is episode 12. I'm your host, Zamb1esaurus, with my co-host, Twiggles. How's life been lately, Twiggles?
Life has been good. Time is flying by. I can't believe we're already on episode 12. It's been a blast. I've been super happy with what we've been able to accomplish and what we've been able to get through, and just goes to show there are endless tangents between us. So how have you been?
Pretty good. I feel like you kind of get into a mode where you're, day after day, you have a routine and you're kind of just moving along. And, one of the topics we're going to talk about is parenting and kids. And when you have them, a routine is so important, but it can also evoke feelings of going insane because you're doing the same thing every single day. So we'll
True.
Definitely get into that more.
Especially when we feel like we have a growth mindset. We're always itchy to try something new. I agree with you. But I think what the podcast especially has done for us is it's given us something novel, something new to try and learn and adapt to. And I feel like it's a great outlet for us to challenge ourselves, which we'll get into a sneak peek, as we get to the end of the episode. But just giving us opportunities to force ourselves to be uncomfortable. I mean, we've talked about some of these topics, and we want to continue to challenge ourselves and encourage our listeners to do the same. The one thing is that, for all of us growing and evolving in our lives, some people are happy, with and content with what they're doing in their life, but there's always something out there that you could learn. While there could be a scary place outside and scary things you don't necessarily know or like, it's also a world of wonder. So many amazing things that you haven't experienced or are out there ripe for the taking. So.
And, that's a very good point. And transitioning into some of the things that we've wanted to talk about, which are related to growth mindset, is some of the goals we set. So it's the beginning of the month. How have your goals been doing?
My goals have been going okay. So as a reminder, I've really been focused on sleep. I'll be honest, my sleep has been a bit erratic. There's been a lot going on in my family, so I don't always get back home at a reasonable time. Oftentimes I'm taken out. I got to go take care of things with my parents, as we've talked about. Lots of things going on, kids' homework, kids' school. In addition to that, my stress snacking, which I think I've generally been doing better. So I'm going to try and pivot this. And something that I'm focusing on is, again, we're not nutritionists, but something that I found has been useful for me is the concept of intermittent fasting. So I've started to come back to this. I kind of strangely like the feeling of being hungry. I'm trying to condition myself to accept this. For many years and many times, I end up overeating because I'm afraid, honestly, fear of being hungry. Just worrying that I'm not going to be able to perform. I'm not going to be, my usual self. But then you also learn to, be okay being hungry, right? It's the sense of your body kind of reminding you and actually listening to your body, on when you're hungry. And oftentimes when I'm, fasting, I realize, am I really hungry? It kind of goes away. And then all of a sudden I'm okay. It could be another 30 minutes to an hour. But then, of course, I have to eventually feed myself. But it's surprising what your body is able to accommodate and tolerate.
Well, to your point, we're humans for a long time were hunter-gatherers. So there were long periods of time where we were hungry.
Absolutely.
And it's in our DNA. It's okay to be hungry.
Yes. It's not okay for me mentally because I don't like the feeling. But yes, I agree. It is something I think is important for me to also appreciate food and appreciate the things and grateful for what I have, instead of just stuffing my face all the time. Because,
to that point, and it's something we'll talk about a little bit later as a tangent, but we're always trying to fill in the time, whether it's I'm hungry or trying to fill in your appetite so you're not hungry, or trying to fill in the time of the day with something instead of being bored, right?
Yeah.
So that's like a common thing that you'll see. And a lot of people are now talking about how we should be bored. Don't try to fill in all your time with phones and things like that. And, spend the time, as they say, go touch grass, right?
Yeah, there is always something that you could be doing, but also I feel like slowing down is also critically important. It's something that we don't, like you said, it's something I don't think we do enough of.
Yeah.
On one of my recent vacations, I think we really got a chance. The culture where we went, the locale, the region was just generally slower and very different than my kind of frantic lifestyle at home. Taking care of all sorts of things. And while we were there, I genuinely felt like we slowed down.
Yeah.
We had an opportunity to take things easy, not have plans every minute, just kind of go relax and just chill out, and it made a difference. So, yeah,
Yeah, it's interesting trying new things and being uncomfortable and learning how other people operate is important to having some sort of variety in life. And, with like the goals, that's one of the things I set out to do with swimming, which was to, one, I needed to learn how to swim. And two, I wanted to be able to be comfortable in the water as my kids grow
yeah,
and they want to go play. And, now that the summer is upon us, I'm going on vacation. We're going to go to a lake. And I actually, for the first time, feel like I'm ready to do it. I'm
nice.
excited. And so I finished my swimming lessons with like a coach I found, and I would go to my local high school and swim every week. And I'm at the point now where I don't actually need to learn how to swim. It's just I need to just actually go
Conditioning.
swim and condition and
Yeah,
just do it. And so being able to say like, yeah, I can swim. Like it took me 9 months to do it, going like once a week or every other week. But, you know,
pretty incredible.
it's awesome. It's an awesome feeling, and now I'm not scared to go into the water at the lake. I'm definitely staying away from oceans because that's just crazy stuff. But you
I
know,
know how to swim, and I don't even go into the oceans. It's
yeah,
not worth it.
yeah, no
One
way,
bad rip tide or something, and you're gone.
heck yeah.
So,
So lake, private, private,
or
relax.
pools,
Nice
yeah,
pool or a
resorts.
lake. Yeah, it's perfect. But
Awesome.
yeah. Um, moving over to, what the main topic is, and we kind of hinted at it a little bit just now, which is we're going to talk about parenting and the balancing act of modern parenting. There is so much information that we can talk about with parenting. So we're actually going to talk about a couple of specific things because it's important to understand that with parenting, a lot of the discussion points are always going to be like, oh, well, you should do this and you should do that. A lot of times they don't talk about the impact it has on the parent itself, right? Because when you're a parent and you're trying to, co-sleep or sleep train or discipline, screen time, all of these different things, right? Like it almost feels like if you make the wrong choice, you're going to permanently damage your child. And,
Mm,
most of parenting is not about making perfect decisions. It's about being
doing your best.
being on the same page with your partner, being consistent with, showing your love and being able to stay firm on whatever it is that you are dealing with your child. So,
But also showing that you can make mistakes, showing
exactly.
that, it is okay to be human, and everyone is trying to learn and do the best they can.
Yeah,
I think
adjusting
it's
adjusting when something is not working. It's so important.
yeah,
And so, one of the things that I think you and I have both dealt with, which is we've talked about before, which is sleep, right? And teaching your children how to sleep, because when they're babies, they don't actually know. Like they're reliant on you for everything, for food, for diaper changes, but also sleep. And sleep hygiene is extremely important. And it's like a sleep dilemma, right? There's a number of ways you can go about it. There's co-sleeping, there's sleep training, there's like a more gentler version of sleep training because for some folks they think it's a bit barbaric. But give me some things about how you felt raising your kids and what you did.
yeah. So before we get into the sort of tactics and things, I think there's a very vivid memory that we have, and I'm sure you can probably relate, and I'll be interested to hear your side of the story too. So I think our older son was only one, so we only had one child at the time. And we took him out on one of his first trips. We decided to go to a water park, an indoor water park. And as you can imagine, lots of sounds, lots of noises. He obviously didn't know how to swim yet. And we just kind of went to the kiddie pools and we didn't really do much. But it was really our first venture. He was around, I think, 1 year old. And when we got there, there was an arcade. I love lights, makes me happy, but sometimes it could be overstimulating. Like you said, to a little kid who doesn't really know, everything looks like fun. And so much fun was had. And then we realized the nightmare that we brought upon ourselves. It was getting late. It was sort of past, bedtime, but he was having so much fun. We were having fun. We're adults. We could accommodate. We're used to sort of jet lagging ourselves by, staying up late. But the child, oh, he was not having it. So he was having fun until he got so exhausted. And like you hear from probably many parents, sometimes children, as you said, are still learning what their thresholds are. And it gets to the point where they need to sleep and they fight against it because
Big
they're just
time.
so tired. And that was a rough night. So we were at the resort, and our son, eventually he passed out because he was so tired. But then he woke up because he wasn't really, ready to go to bed, and he was just, I think, overexhausted, and he was just screaming for upwards to an hour, and it was a rough night. Like we don't know what to do. How do we try and get him back to sleep? And obviously we tried to calm him down and kind of walked with him back and forth and just get some motion and rocking and all the usual. I
Yep.
actually forgot most of them, but all the baby tactics, right, to get him to sleep. And we eventually got him to sleep. But after that, we realized, okay, no, sleep time is very precious. We got to be really careful. And there's always going to be times, as you said, you go for a wedding, you go for some special event, or it's a long drive, and the schedules just don't quite align. But I think most of our parent friends all realize that they had that one memory. I'm very curious what your memory is. There must be some core thing that
So it's
happened to you also.
actually interesting that you mentioned the scheduling and, especially with going to weddings and those kind of events, because when I visit my family, it absolutely destroys my kids because
Mm,
my family grew up with zero routine.
mm.
And when I mean zero, like going to bed at 11, 12 o'clock,
Oh,
it is terrible.
it
It
is
is
erratic.
so bad for you as a child. And it explains so much about my upbringing, right? Going to bed at like midnight as like a 6-year
Yeah.
old, right? Um, when I meet my family and my kids hang out, they're like, "Oh, don't leave." They eat, my family eats dinner at 5. My kids are in bed by the younger one's in bed by 6:30. The older one's in bed by 7:30. Usually, actually falls asleep by 8:30. When my family doesn't eat dinner until 7:30. So when
Mm.
we go to hang out with them, I usually try to cater it towards lunch, but they eat lunch at like 4 o'clock. So it's ridiculous. And so um, one time we slept over my mom's house, and so we did the usual thing where we had dinner at like 7:30, and then my family wants to sit down, they want to talk, they want to drink tea, they want to eat pastries and just
Mm-hmm.
talk and have a good
Desserts.
time. And now we're pushing into like 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. Finally, the kids, my two boys, when they get really tired, they literally become like acrobatic, and they start jumping off things and
Mm,
jumping. They like become like WWE wrestlers, and they're like literally jumping onto people. So then
mm.
finally they're like, okay, I think they actually need to go to bed. So we put them to bed. And the two kids, they don't just go to bed, right? Like they might toss and turn, they might cry. So my family keeps walking into the bedroom and opening the door
Oh,
to check on them. And we're like, what are you doing? Get out of
mm.
the room. They have no concept of like boundaries. And safe to say,
Stimulus is just triggering them
they
back.
they did not go to bed until like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning.
Oh no.
And my kids are early risers. They were up at 6:30.
Yeah, it's hard
And
to break that habit also because the kids will
yes,
wake up.
they
They
wake
know
up.
it's weekend time.
It drives me
Doesn't care.
nuts.
No
I
school.
can't stand it. They wake up late on the weekdays, and on
Of
the
course.
weekend, my older son is
Bright
up
and
at
early.
6 o'clock, and he's jumping on my stomach.
Yeah.
I can't stand it,
I feel you on that one. I,
and it's the only reason why I go to bed early lately is because he will always wake up early.
it's true.
So if I go to bed late, I better have a
You're going to pay the
real good
price.
reason to be going to bed late.
Yeah. I think kind of also I wanted to mention on one of the earlier points was the reality is that we're not experts. We've
Nope.
learned a lot. A lot of this is from our experience. And I think the real key that we've all learned and why we want to share is the reality is that in this growing age of, social media and partially misinformation and also realizing that every kid is different. I think the important thing that we've been discovering is really making sure you have a strong community amongst your friends. If you have the luxury of being part of religious group or other types of communities and things, you might have access to other people around your age. But if you don't, it can be terrifying.
Yep.
As a first time parent, I know when we raised our kids, our first son, our both of our parents were not really in the picture. So we essentially raised the kids on our own. One set of parents was about an hour plus away. They were getting older. Those are my parents. And, my wife's, parents are not together anymore. So, the dad kind of comes by when he can, but that's really it.
Yep.
Nobody's there to tell us, give us advice. And even when they do, their advice might be a little bit outdated. Some things have been kind of proven scientifically is probably not the right approach, but we're essentially on our own, and I remember vividly within the first few weeks of my first son's being born, we were at home. Talking about sleep, we were so sleep deprived that I was starting to hallucinate. And I started to panic because there was a warm spot in my bed, but I couldn't find my son. We did not go to sleep. He was clearly downstairs with my wife. And she moved down to downstairs to go sleep because that's where the crib was. And he was fine. But I was so delirious and so tired that we had done the laundry and there was a warm spot of laundry. And I just passed out and I woke up and I'm like, what is that? No, I rolled over and crushed him. Why is this a warm spot? I don't understand. And I forgot that I had done the laundry and I ran downstairs and I see them both sleeping. And I was like, oh man, that is rough. But again, nobody really tells you about these things.
Yeah.
The hospitals try and do their best to, hey, we really encourage, nursing and breastfeeding is healthier for the kid. Make sure I think it was SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome. It's been a while now, right? Like, please,
Yep.
Don't shake your child.
Yep.
All
When
these
you're
different
mad,
things, right?
yeah, walk away.
Yeah, when
that
you're
kind of
mad, you have
stuff.
to walk away. Like they force you to take this class before you leave because it's critical.
Yep.
You are never really taught how you're going to react, and I think we'll probably get into, well, actually maybe not even today, but we'll get into just the raw emotions that it go through and how I think both of us have learned to deal with our own selves. Because until you really understand, until you really have almost like the ultimate mirror of you triggering yourself will really push you to the limit.
Well, it's interesting you say that, like, excuse me. You know how like on an airplane they say if there's an emergency, like you need to save yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
It's the same thing here. You need to be able to take care of yourself before you can take care of your kid.
absolutely.
And so one of the things that we started to do, when we were having our child, like we started reading about sleep training and all the different things that you need to do. And baby industry is extremely predatory.
Yeah.
But there are some good resources. There's a lot of free material on YouTube, like, neonatal nurses and things like that, not like just your average influencer, but like actual professionals. And one of the things they talk about is sleep training. And it's kind of a contentious thing because for us, it worked. It worked really well. But for some parents, the thought of hearing their child cry can induce such strong emotions. And as you say, like, you don't know how to react to it. And
you won't know how you yourself will react until that time happens.
One of the things that they mention is that the baby's cry, it's in a frequency and range, and also as a parent, your body reacts to that cry in such a way that it can really make a jarring impact on you. Like it's designed to do that. It's designed to trigger it.
Right.
And so luckily for us, like the first couple of months of our son, being born, we actually didn't go to bed early. So what we actually did was we went to bed at midnight, which sounds terrible, but he used to go to bed and then wake up. We would put him to bed at like 9:00. He would wake up at midnight and then we'd have to put him to bed again. So what we ended up doing was we would take shifts, right? Like my wife would go to bed at like 8. I would stay up until midnight, 1:00, and then we would switch and she would feed him or do her in the middle of the night breast pumping or feeding or whatever. And that allowed her to get like 6 hours plus another 4, and that I could do like 12 to 7. And when he started sleep training and we put him in his own room in the crib, he started to, we would put him to bed at 7:00. And that was a huge change for him. He was only a couple of months old. The first night he cried for like 30 minutes and then he fell asleep. And they talk about how like it's going to be, really jarring. You can't walk into the room. You can't reset him. And we were like, okay, we have to like hold each other essentially because the first night was so bad. Literally the second night, it was maybe 15 minutes. The third night, 5 minutes. And then by night 4, he didn't even cry. We put him in the crib and he fell right asleep and he would sleep until 4 a.m. and then one of
Hmm.
us would take him to feed. And it sounds terrible to hear your child cry, but remember, like, they don't know how to go to bed. You are literally showing them how to go to bed by, like, doing the swaddle and wrapping and,
Hmm.
reading a book and having that routine. But being able to do those things teaches them, like, okay, this is how we do bedtime. And as they get older, it becomes ingrained in them. And
Yeah, giving them some ability to be independent, learn, showing them that,
right.
of course, they are newborns, so it is difficult, right? I mean, we also similarly started pretty young. We talked about co-sleeping, but then as soon as our kids were born, both of them, we decided that we weren't going to co-sleep at all. The only situations where we would co-sleep was if we were traveling, which will become one of the topics I'm sure we'll talk about in a minute. But we essentially had the kids in their own bassinets, and then eventually their crib, and it was convertible, right? And then they get old fast, but they always slept on their own. We obviously made sure there was no stuffed animals, no toys, no blankets and things, set the temperature and everything correctly. But I do also remember, it was difficult, as you said. The kids will cry, but then they adapted pretty well. That's not to say that there weren't sleep regressions. I think that's also one of the difficult things. So as you
Yeah.
said, it sounds like you were able to do it relatively quickly, but kind of curious, were there any relapses? Were there any
Oh,
circumstances,
big time.
where it kind of reset and then it's like, oh man, and then you feel bad, right? Like, oh, how do I know if I'm doing the right thing? You
So,
know?
so with the sleep training, both of our boys slept through the night. Not fully through the night. Like, during the first year, they would wake up and we would do the feedings.
Hmm.
After about a year, they started to sleep through the night. Um, but our older son, so for folks who have extremely athletic children, my older son was 1.5 when he watched his 4-year-old cousin climb out of a pack and play.
Mm.
That night, he climbed out of his crib and waltzed into our bedroom at 5 a.m. and just crying. And we were both staring at him like, how did you get out? Because you're only 1.5. And we put him back in the crib and he immediately like vaulted over and we were like, oh my God.
That's when you immediately drop the adjustable crib to the lowest
It
setting,
didn't
and then you
matter.
hope it
Didn't
gives you a little bit
matter.
of time.
He figured that was our problem. So this is the thing. You have an extremely athletic kid. He figured out he could grab the slats of his crib with his
Hmm.
big toe and his princess toe and literally climb up
Yeah,
and figured out also that he could do a running jump. So we had already lowered it down to the lowest point,
yeah.
and he was like, nope, that's nothing for me. And he would just literally run and whip his leg over and jump out. So from 1.5 every night, he started to come into our bedroom. So
Mm.
we actually put him in a toddler bed because it's not, obviously it's not safe for him to be literally
Yeah.
vaulting over a crib every night. That became a huge, huge problem. It was like an hour of bedtime, me and him every night, and him screaming, crying, hitting, kicking, punching, biting, me picking him up, putting him back in the crib, and then he would just attack me because he didn't want to go to bed and he wanted to play. And it went on for 6 to 9 months, and then we actually bought a tatami mat, and I would lie down on the bed on the floor with him, and we would essentially just snuggle until he fell asleep.
Hmm.
To this day, he's almost 5 now. One of us has to go into his bedroom at night and stay with him for about 45 minutes until he falls asleep. Because immediately he'll walk out he won't stay down. And maybe this summer we've started to put hints in like, oh, like if you stay in bed all night, you'll get a reward and
Hmm.
like this and that. And so this summer we're going to try to train him to stay in his bed at night. But since 1.5, it's been 2.5 years, almost 3 years now. Every single night he comes out of the bedroom and he just walks into our room and he lies down in the middle of our bed and goes to sleep without fail.
He knows what he's doing.
He knows
He
exactly
he
what he's
he.
doing.
he it's interesting. I would even almost argue that is a lever. That's a type of co-sleeping. I
It
mean,
is, yeah.
So I hear you. It's difficult. So some of our relapses, we also had that. It wasn't perfect. Our older son did adapt pretty quickly. Our younger son was also great. Like he was really just took to his own, eventually he grew older, and the second one always seems to adapt and learn a lot faster. But with our older son, he did have some struggles. And there were some times, especially on vacations or trips, where, like you said, the routine is kind of broken. But also that is an opportunity for us to show and be strong and say, hey, this is like you said, these are the routines that we have. We try and, take a warm bath or a warm shower, settle in. But it's also tough because, like you said, my kids are relatively energetic too. So it always seemed like right before bed, oh, they had this burst of energy. They'd be running around, and our house is not that large. So they're just sprinting back and forth, jumping off of stuff to burn energy. So we kind of just had to embrace it and say, hey, okay, well, you obviously have extra energy. It's not really realistic for you to go to bed right now. But each parent has to come up with a different routine. I've heard some other friends also where they, start to read books, but then also you have to be careful of the contents of the books. Sometimes it could be nightmare triggering, could be things that they don't like or they don't realize it's a little too scary, and then all of a sudden they have nightmares. So there was a stretch, I think probably also maybe like 3 to 6 months, where the older son, I would have to stay near him. I would, like you said, I think you had a strategy of lying on the floor. I did also, and that was also cue in back to my goal of sleeping on time. Once I start to relax on the floor with the lights dimmed out, oh man, this is a prime time to fall asleep. I would pass out and then I would turn out, wake up. I'm like, where's my kid? He already left the room, and I'm just lying there on the floor.
Yeah,
but I would get a great nap in.
Yep.
So, and you realize that's another reason to identify that your body is so tired that removing all the stimulation, I actually just naturally fell asleep because I was that tired.
Yeah.
So
that happens to me today. Even yesterday, I was putting him to bed at like 7:45. I was out for a good like 10 minutes there, and then luckily, as you said, like if you have energetic kids, try to burn it out. So we let her, as soon as the weather gets, not really. We just let them play outside, regardless of the weather. As long as it's like above zero, they're outside playing. And he actually fell asleep by 8:15, but I actually fell asleep by like 7:55 and woke up at 8:15. So it's so difficult. But the whole point is, sleep training. Whether you do it like the gentle, there's a couple of ways to do it, cry it out method, whichever. But like the point is, you want to train your child to learn how to sleep, because the more they sleep, the more you sleep. And that is a preservation tactic that, they mention like, it's almost like a rite of passage. Oh, good luck, your sleep's gone, you have a newborn. But like, that doesn't necessarily mean that's the case. Like you will have a difficult time first in the beginning, but it can get better. And as long as you plan it out with your partner, like you can manage it.
Yeah, I think that is the key. It's aligning with your partner, trying to have a tactic and strategy, understanding that it's going to be difficult. But the even more difficult thing is if two people can't necessarily align, right? If they don't necessarily agree, because maybe one just feels more strongly that they just can't resist, and they see. I've heard stories where the kids can get, almost borderline violent, or just start to gag and kind of almost throw up, and they just don't feel good, and all these different things. And they could actually have physical reactions. But it's almost like if you give in, which is, we'll get to a later topic of kind of saying no, and sort of putting your foot down, because as the parent, they look to you for guidance, where the boundaries are. They are constantly, especially as they start to get a little bit older, 3, 4, or 5 years old, they are already learning and adapting and reading your every move, more so than you probably even you realize. There's many circumstances I'm sure that you realize is like, wow, where did you pick that up from? How did you even observe these things? We move one little thing and they say, hey, how come that box over there moved from like, 2 inches? I'm like, what box? How did you, that you can't even see up that? Oh no, but I noticed, and then they start asking about it. So it's very important to realize that every little action and thing that you do is influencing them in potentially a good or a bad way. You don't know. That's also the fun and joy of it, is that your child could go either completely in the direction just like you, or the polar opposite. And it's almost like a dice roll.
It's funny you mentioned that. And I think that it also goes back to like why sleep is so important, because, the child struggles with regulation, especially when they're sleep deprived. But like a chronically sleep deprived parent is going to struggle with like patience, decision making, your emotional control. You're going to yell at the kid. all of
100%.
those things. And as you say, they are
It's a
learning from
vicious
you.
cycle.
You
Yes.
so you have to have so much patience because you're sleep deprived, because you'll feel guilty if you yell at them because it's like, oh, I can't believe I did that,
And
Y-
also, you need to stack the deck to help yourself, and you
exactly.
need to prioritize yourself, like you said with the the airplane. It's so critical that you become more aware of your situation, what your tolerance levels are, and how do you improve it, because your child is really needs your help. They don't know.
They absolutely do not know. They absolutely do not know. And um speaking of no, the word no is very important.
It is.
The art of saying no to your child. I thought it would be easy to say no, but man, when
They're gonna guilt trip
they
you with
guilt
the
trip
puppy dog
you, if
eyes.
they do it,
Yeah.
if they do it the nice way with the puppy dog eyes and guilt trip you and be like, oh, daddy, can you please get this for me? Or they could just annoy the ever living crap
Yeah.
out of you. And
Yep.
then you're just like, okay, fine, just do whatever you want. Leave
They
me
know how to
alone.
push your buttons. We talked about
Oh man.
patience. Oh, they have endless energy.
It's funny. I complained to my wife the other day. I'm like, man, these two boys are such little punks. And she goes, well, where did they learn it from? And she's
Yeah.
just staring at me, and I'm like, damn it. They are,
Spitting image.
they look at all the boundaries and they're like, which one can I step over? And, whatever patience and limits you have, like be prepared to break them and have to move your own goalposts because these kids they're going to push everything.
And I'm curious because as a parent, I actually think that creative nature and that problem solving is a great strength to have.
Yeah.
Testing the boundaries, right? There are often times where, you're growing older, understanding what you're capable of. Ultimately, life is just really challenging yourself every day to see what could I do and where are you comfortable with, your performance. On a daily basis, again, there's nothing wrong with it, but a lot of people fall into routines because they like the certainty. But then are you reaching your max potential? What is your potential? Some of these other topics we've discussed before, but the children need to know, and often they don't know where the boundary is. They don't know what they're capable of, but they do know that they probably like getting what they want. I mean,
Oh
who
yeah.
doesn't? And they will continue to push you. And I think that was one of the hardest things for us. So as we kind of get into saying no, like you said, I've listened to a lot of, to kind of tie back into the finances and things, a lot of the different podcasts, and they talk about when they interview some of the parents, and it's often you see them in massive debt, and the host will often say, "Hey, do you ever say no to your children?" And they say, "Nope." So, well, now we know where all your money went, and sorry, go
It's
ahead.
Well, no, I was going to say it's saying no to them when they start crying. It's heartbreaking, and like you don't want to say no because you don't want to be the bad parent to them.
Yeah,
You don't want them to hate you or have the other parent become the fun parent, right? And then there's like a
right.
bad parent, a fun parent. And like it's not a rejection, saying no doesn't mean like I don't love
You're
you
terrible, or you're at fault.
yeah, it
I agree.
doesn't
That's
mean it really means like I'm responsible for guiding you
and we're
and
setting
I'm
the
telling you
boundary,
that
and
this
you
is a
have to
boundary.
respect it. Right.
And if you keep doing it enough, they'll understand that, you can be disappointed but still be safe and loved and like feel comfortable in your own home.
Or you even try and set those boundaries to help them. Again, I see it as a potential strength. There have been some very creative situations with my kids where they see the boundary and they go, "Oh, I could do this," you say. And I say, "Hey, that is a completely logical answer. I will accept that." And
That's
we
fair.
have some interesting stories. So one recently, we were on our trip and we had some leftover currency, local currency, and we were good and ready to go back to the airport. And we said, "Hey, we're going to go run to the store. We're going to go get some snacks, get some things that you want to eat on the plane. You could pick out one thing." Okay. So my older son starts looking and browsing and say, "Ooh, there's a bag of gummies. I'm going to pick that." And I said, "Okay, no, go ahead. That's not a problem." My younger son sees is like, "Oh, well, I'm going to get one of the smaller ones, the Kinder Egg." I was like, "That's it? You really?" He's like, "Yeah, it's okay. But yeah, you're right. It's kind of small. Can I get two?" "Sure, you can get two. That's a fair trade." Okay. Now we're starting to get a rush. I was like, "Okay, well, just grab two." He grabs two and he goes, Yeah, but you know what? It's two of the same thing. Can I swap one of them? Yeah, sure. So what does he go and do? He swaps one of the eggs for the bag of gummies. And now suddenly he has a bag of gummies and an egg. And before you know it, my older son, we already rang it up. I said, hurry up, let's go. We rang it up and we left. And my older son goes, wait a minute. How come I only got one bag of gummies? He got a Kinder egg also. And I said, well, he logically said I wanted the two. He's like, that's so not fair. And I said, yeah, but you could have also corrected, say, hey, I also want one, but you were busy not paying attention. And
You got
I said,
got.
look, I got, but he got what he wanted. And he found a way. I don't know how intentional it was, but it all worked out quite comically. And obviously, we got some other snacks and things for my older son. But yeah, like testing the limits, finding where you could push those boundaries, but also the art of saying no. I mean, I'll get into this later. I'm curious about your other stories, but yeah, they're really going to test your limits, and some of them have a lot of. They could be quite stubborn.
Yeah. No, my kids are perfect. I have no stories. No.
Sure.
You know, so a lot of experimenting with our older son in the sense of like, we let him do what he wants
Mhm.
within a certain like framework, right? Like, as long as you're being safe and as long as your little brother is being, not being beaten up on, essentially, we let them kind of duke it out to a degree and play with each other, fight with each other, because we've noticed that like they will eventually figure it out, and then they'll just start playing with each other, right? Like they might fight over the same toy, and then it's like, okay, well, you can be the mediator in between them, but then sometimes you
It
don't
almost
have
takes
to.
away the opportunity for them to figure it out themselves.
Exactly. And so to your point about like pushing the boundaries and learning from it, like having the two kids play with each other, fight with each other, and then resolve the difference to keep playing is really important. And it's great for the parent because the less you have to deal with it, right? Like the more the logical the kids get, the better it'll be for them and for you. And when they make those mistakes, it's interesting to watch because like, for example, my older son, he's 4.5, and he can completely ride a bike. He's been riding a bike for like 2 years now, like full with pedals. And so our younger son is now 2, and he's on like a balance bike, and he didn't want to use it at first, but then he realized like, I can't keep up with my brother because he's on a real bike with pedals and he's just flying around the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And so then we kept trying to coax him. The younger one, to use a balance bike. He wouldn't do it. And then he finally realized like, man, I want to keep up. So he started to go on the balance bike, started falling over all over the place, getting hurt, scraps, whatnot. But within like a month, now I look at him and he's got his feet up and he's literally going down like a 30-degree grade hill.
Yeah.
And he's like 2 on like a plastic balance bike and trying to keep up with his brother who's on like a bike with gears,
Yeah.
And it's wild to see how quickly they can learn, but you have to let them fail. Even if it means getting a little hurt, like my older son fell plenty of times, got all kinds of cuts and scrapes and stuff like that. And kids are resilient. He's fine.
Yeah.
Within reason.
I agree. It's within reason, because I think we'll get into this as sort of the next kind of topic about sort of being filled with fear and anxiety. I think this will be a segue into something we talk about later, but I have a lot of anxiety. I have a lot of worries. I'm constantly thinking about what could go wrong. That actually plays as a strength to my work because I'm constantly finding the defects. I'm constantly trying to, quality assurance things and say, hey, this is probably not going to work. Great. But when it comes to children, as you said, they do need to fail. And ironically, this is how I teach at work. When I mentor people and teach them, I say, my teaching method is I'm going to force you to fail because guess what? When you fail, you're going to hopefully remember it. Much better than being successful and just doing it on the first shot. It also encourages you that reminds you that you're not perfect and you have room to grow.
Yeah.
And I think the difficult thing you mentioned, I could still vividly remember many of the times where I witnessed my children flying off of their bike, and it was terrifying There's times where we were in the park and they're just riding, and I said, "Oh, this is not going to go well." And they couldn't brake properly, and they just hit like a block, like a big enough like concrete block, and just flew over the handlebars, like head first, full somersault, and I could not believe it. Thank goodness they didn't get hurt too badly. But even in some of the other cases, we were going at a friend's place and going down a hill, and I said, I'm terrified of scooters. So for those that don't know, I'm 6'1", and I don't like. I'm fine on a bike, but a scooter I just don't have control over because I've never really skateboarded. It always
Hmm.
terrified me. I like early on, when I was young, I kind of fell a few times, and then that fear just stayed in my head. Okay, and I never really experienced scooters that much, but he loved it. He was zipping around everywhere, showing off with one leg up and things. But he was going down the hill, and he goes, "Uh-oh, I'm going too fast." And I was like, there's no way this is going to end well because it just kept going downhill. He eventually lost control, and then he did tumble and fall, and he rolled, and he was generally fine. Now, there have been a variety of other cases where he has actually gotten hurt more seriously. And we're always trying to be safe. Again, we're never encouraging, your kids to just be completely reckless. But they are also durable. They're not as tall and as fragile as some of us as you get older, right? My younger son has broken a bone in his wrist. Luckily, it was sort of a smushy kind of fracture, so not like a clean break, and luckily not at the growth plate, so he was able to recover pretty quickly. Both my kids also got stitches on their face, which was terrifying. Hospital visits, ER, and all sorts of stuff. Different scrapes here and there. But also we started to actively put them into scenarios to be able to safely experiment. So we put
Yeah.
them into martial arts, we put them into gymnastics. We said, "Hey, you guys are falling a lot." We couldn't figure out, maybe it's your feet, maybe it's your sneakers, maybe it's your legs, maybe there's something unbalanced. It could be anything. And we investigated a lot.
It's
But, yeah,
it's
gymnastics really gave us an opportunity to let them fall on purpose, you
and
know?
to your point, like every child is different. And so some children may need that structure. They may need the support from the parent about like things like, gymnastics or, Kid Strong or um I guess Ninja Warrior, rock climbing,
Yeah.
whatever it is that, you might be interested in, right? Like
They can
those are
learn
all
what their body is capable of.
exactly. But some, not every kid is like that. And like other kids may need more flexibility. Like my son, we've put him literally in everything. And he loves some things and he doesn't love the others. But the one thing I know that he loves to do is just go outside and play.
Yeah.
Unstructured playtime. He loves to just go outside, ride his bike, pretend to run a coffee shop delivery service. That's his favorite thing to do lately. And his little brother will make a coffee and then he'll pretend to ride his bike around and take orders and then tell us that, he's out of stock of whatever we actually order.
Go get some more coffee.
It's basically order this or nothing at all. But,
Yeah.
there's a lot of, good parenting is not just like following like a rule book and like being able to, say, okay, well, my kid has done this, right? Like you have to adapt to your child's needs. And it's a really hard thing to do, but you have to pay attention and see what they're doing. And, if they're excelling at stuff, great. And maybe give them a little nudge to see if they can do more. But if they're not, if there's something that they're struggling at, like let them work through it first. And if they can't, that's when you can step in and try to start helping them out.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different ways, but, there's a lot of different principles and things and tactics you can do to help them out in that sense. But like above all, like the child needs to be reminded like they're safe, that they're loved, and that you're consistent with these things and you respect them and their choices that they make, which can be so difficult because man, kids are dumb at a young age. And
Yeah.
like, you're letting them make a choice. It's the wrong choice. And it's so easy to be like, no, what are you doing? Like, that's not how you do it. Let me show you how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that kind of leads into our other topic, which is really about like, parenting and the different kinds of parenting that can happen. Specifically, I know helicopter parenting is a big one. I think it comes from a place of anxiety. And in this day and age with social media consumption, you're always seeing a highlight reel of other families and you're always comparing your entire self to a highlight reel of someone else's best. And it's
Or
creating more anxiety for
the
you.
good or the worst. There's a
Yeah.
lot of the news is going to start fear mongering and talking about abductions and, drugs and social media, bad things, predators, all sorts of things. And it fills your mind with all these terrible things. I think, as you said, I know when I grew up, it's just a different life
Yeah.
for, I think, all of us. I mean, growing up, my kids asked me, so what'd you used to do? We went to go visit my parents' old house. It's like, oh, I used to ride my bike across the highway. Would I let my kid do that now? Probably not. I mean,
No.
he's getting older, so maybe at some point. But for the most part, I mean, even today, I wouldn't really trust him to go on his own. And he's already, 10 years old. But he did actually ride the bus by himself. And it was a very short ride, and it was something that he was used to, and it worked out well. But we're going to slowly start integrating this as he's getting older. But yeah, I'm kind of curious, like what kind of things I'm sure you did your variety of things, that were potentially crazy for a
Oh.
kid, but you know what I mean? Like, without getting
Yeah.
too detailed.
Oh my God.
Did you have much, I guess, was there much dependence, or were your parents around a
So
lot, like, because were they working, or you're kind of on your own?
it's so interesting that the idea of helicopter parenting, because I grew up in a house where my family 100% were helicopter parents, but only on specific things,
Mm,
right? Like on a day-to-day basis, they wanted to make sure that I was home in the afternoon or evening, having dinner and going to bed and that kind of stuff, right? But I would come home from school. Sometimes I'd walk home. Sometimes I'd just go to my friend's house and then walk home from my friend's house. There wasn't a lot of boundary in that
less cell
sense.
phones, less internet, no real
Play
text messaging.
outside,
Yeah.
sports, go to my friend's house, play video games, ride my bike home, that kind of thing. And as I got older, that freedom expanded for me. Once I started to learn how to drive, I could be like, all right, well,
Yeah.
I'm going to the mall to hang out with my friends. But,
Hmm.
you know, the helicopter parenting sort of came in with certain things like, um, oh, don't stay out past 9 o'clock. You'll just get arrested. Like that's literally what they would tell me. Like you'll just be
Mm.
arrested. Right. Like fear mongering. Even back then in the 90s growing up, like there was still fear mongering. There were a
Yeah.
lot of, those like
I mean, it's still, even to this day, there's
suburban rumors and this
right.
and that. Oh, you get kidnapped, never take candy from the vans, the ice cream
Yeah.
trucks. They're just trying to lure you in, right? And it's all like really silly stuff now that you think about it, but
But there is also a potential
there's
threat.
always that one
It's
story.
difficult, right? That
Yeah.
is going to stick in your mind, and the what ifs, and I think the anxiety really then transcribes to your children, which is what I think I struggle with even to this day. As my kids grow up, if they ever listen to this, one of the things that I wish I could have done better was to better understand my anxiety, better understand how it was propagating to my kids. Because what would happen is like you said, I'm worried that you're going to make a mistake.
Yeah.
I struggled to let them make mistakes, even with things that didn't matter. I don't remember the exact details, but, one of the content creators, Mark Rober, that we like to watch with the kids, there's a lot of science and STEM experiments, great videos and experiments. But he talks about the Mario effect. And I think it was something along the lines of, well, nobody necessarily knows how to play Mario when you first start. When you first play, most people nowadays know, hey, this coin is good.
Yeah.
This mushroom is also good. It makes me grow bigger. But why would you ever think that a mushroom is going to help you? Oh, there's a turtle. Why would I think the turtle is going to hurt me? And slowly over time, you kind of learn and adapt, and you eventually kind of get better. But even with those little things with the games, I tried the Mario effect with my older son, and he died. He jumped in the pit. Surprise. That's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
He started crying, and he never wanted to play again. It was mind-blowing to me. I was like, what do you mean? What do you mean? He's like, no, I made a mistake. I can't bear to do this again. I don't want to play anymore. And I was shocked, because that is not the effect that I wanted.
Yeah.
I wanted to show them that, hey, this is a video game. It's perfectly fine. But then also part of me, I try to show what you could do. But what he doesn't understand is how many years I've played these games and how many times I've fallen and failed.
Yeah.
So I try to also expose that. He'd be like, hey, did you win? Nope. This is my 100th time losing. And you know what? I still enjoy it because I'm playing with friends, but you don't always win them all.
I mean,
as long as, you set your boundaries, you know what you're looking to get out of it. Am I always trying to improve? Sure. but some things aren't meant to be. I'm not, the greatest chess player. I'm not the best at certain sports. You learn your limits, but not even want to experiment. That was a real struggle. And I do think that was a correlation to me almost setting the bar too high. And then I think it's a little bit easier with my younger son. Maybe I've done a better job. I don't know. I've been slowly trying to adjust my older son, but he tends to be more cautious and worried about making mistakes. And
Yeah.
I fear that it was a lot of how I sort of raised him.
Yeah, that's really tough because like I too have anxiety, and I realize, my kids are a lot younger than yours, but like I realize like there's points where my anxiety and the way I'm talking to my son, and I realize like he's going to become that way, and I don't want him
Yeah,
to be.
right.
And so I've kind of thought about like changing my mindset to instead of like I don't want to fail, like I want you to fail.
Yeah.
And not in a mean way, but like he was getting to a point where he would ask me to do a lot of things for him, and at some point I just started saying, no, like you have 2 hands and 2 feet, go do it yourself. And he's like, well, I can't. I was like, did you try? And he would say,
Oh, that's the big
no.
one.
I said,
That's the big
well,
one.
you don't know if you can't do something until you try it.
We set a rule where we say, if you say I can't, you have to repeat it back, and you say, how can I?
That's
right?
a good one. Yeah.
You can't say I can't anymore, because I don't want to hear you say you can't. I mean, there might actually be some things that he can't, right? He can't be, 7 foot tall right now. But the reality is that if you change your mindset and you change your approach in just a simple word, and we tried to correct as often as we could, it was still difficult. And there's still times where they just throw a hissy fit and don't want to,
Oh yeah.
they don't want to listen. But if you keep kind of reminding them and say, hey, what exactly do you want? Let's reframe the question, and I'm happy to try and help you. And then you realize what you could actually accomplish and do, and it's so then you really start to think.
Yeah, it's interesting because like even a year ago, I would never let my son play with scissors. He was only like 3.5, right? Now he's 4.5, and just yesterday, I got a package in the mail, giant box. I took all the stuff out, and I was like, "Here's a box," and he's like, "Okay." And I watched him as he ran into the kitchen. He got masking tape. He got a scissor. He cut the flaps on the box, and then started taping them in weird ways. And he goes, Dada, look, I made a rocket ship. And I'm like, sweet. That's pretty
Sure
cool.
is.
And the box
Yeah.
is big enough that his younger brother sat down, and then he modified the front of the box so that his little brother had like, controls, whatever. But like a year ago, I probably wouldn't have let him do that, because I would been too afraid, like, oh, like you're going to get hurt. But like, it's really like a question of like, he should just learn, like with the bike riding, like he's going to get hurt, but with cutting with scissors, like you need to learn how to do it, and then you can do it yourself.
Under supervision, have an interest to do it, give them some reason to try and learn and want to do it.
Yeah.
And allow them to overcome sort of that fear.
And it's interesting because like kids want to emulate their parents, right? And all the time parents are doing things that are too dangerous for the kids. And they're like, no, you can't do it. And the kid is like, well, I want to do it. You're doing it. And one of the things that, on the weekends, my wife and I cook. We cook all of our food for the whole week. We talked about in other podcasts, like the meal prepping. But my older son loves to watch us cook, and he always wants to join in. And so we were like, okay, why not? I mean, we didn't give him a real knife, but we bought like a kid's chef knife. And we said, okay, here's a cutting board. Here's a cucumber. We cut it into quarters so that he could actually cut slices of cucumber for himself, so that he could pack his own snacks at school. So like we gave him like not a whole bell pepper, but we like cut it so that he could manage it. And we gave kind of started him out and gave him all the things that he needed to do. And he can like, dice cucumber and dice bell pepper, and cut his own strawberries. And like when we do like bread making or anything, baking wise, and we're mixing stuff, I have him measure everything out. It's like teaching him numbers.
You're gonna make a mess. You're gonna make a mess.
It's
Try
a
and
huge
crack
mess.
the egg. Oh, it's so much slower, but it's also so redeeming to spend that time. We've also done some baking and things. This is actually during the pandemic. So my kids were getting to the age during the pandemic where we had some activities where they say, try and do some baking, try and do something. There's a lot of virtual stuff. We actually had a virtual kind of baking friend group. I only did it a few times with them, but they did it more regularly where they would meet together. Everyone would pick a recipe. Everybody would go buy the recipes and virtually do it together.
Yeah.
So I joined them, and one time it was I think carrot cake cookies or something, and I would never do that, but I used the box grater, shredded it, and it had the kids measure out the flour. There's flour everywhere, carrots everywhere. But we had some great videos and photos, and then they can kind of tell their teachers like, hey, look, I made cookies with my dad, and we had fun, and we made it, and they start to learn more about it, and kind of going back also to just some of the helicopter parenting for me, because I know I used to do it. You talked about, letting the kids kind of fight and just get used to it. The parallel that I have is once upon a time, I had taken care of some kittens, and the stray cats in our neighborhood had kittens, and I brought them in to go try and take care of them, eventually get the moms spayed and neutered and the other kids, right, and the kittens. But one of the interesting things I learned as being sort of a cat dad, while they were growing, was learning that they need to play together. Often if the kittens are exposed to being alone by themselves too early on, they don't learn boundaries, just like kids. So what happens is if one kitten crosses the line, the other kitten will very clearly and vocally, especially the mom, will correct it immediately and say, hey, this is a line you don't cross. You need to understand to respect it. And if kittens don't have that in their life early on, so I ended up adopting out the kittens. Ideally, you would adopt them in pairs, but I just didn't have the luxury of doing that. But I told the new adopting parents that I was going to keep them at my house for the first 3 months because I didn't want to separate them, because I knew they were going to households with just themselves. And it was too critical to miss this, because what happens is as they start to grow older, if they didn't learn those boundaries, you're going to be that boundary.
Yeah.
And they're not going to learn.
Yep.
And they're going to start scratching you. They're going to try and play with you, and they could get a little bit violent. They might bite you and all sorts of things. And, for me with my kids, it was difficult because I always felt like my younger son was the baby. And at the time he was young. And sometimes my older son could be pretty rough. I said, hey, stop bullying him. Stop picking on him. And my younger son tends to cry a bit. And then I feel bad.
Yeah.
So then I come in feeling like I need to be the defender to protect him. But then what happens? My older son feels like he's not getting the attention. Why was I always siding with the younger son? And then it got to a point where I would ask my wife, I would get super upset. I said, why don't you intervene? She's like, there's nothing to intervene. They're still figuring it out. Why are we stepping in?
Yeah.
And it was real difficult for me to accept that. And over time, I got better. I realized that my anger was triggering, and I needed to calm myself down. And, sometimes there would be violence between them. But like you said, they would often resolve it.
Yeah.
Before getting really badly hurt. Although, ironically, this morning, actually today, I get home from work, and apparently emotions were getting a little fiery, and a banana was thrown, and someone dodged, and it put a dent in the garbage can, and mom wasn't too happy.
Yeah.
So it happens.
It's funny because this starts at such an early age. I can still vividly remember us repeatedly telling our older son, don't hit your brother. All you're doing is teaching him that hitting is okay.
He's going to grow up
and
fast.
He's going to grow up, and you're going to start getting hit. And he obviously doesn't understand, and he doesn't listen.
Of course not.
So fast forward to a month ago, I'm sitting there Saturday morning, and I'm eating my breakfast. The kids are playing. They're sitting on the floor, and my older son grabs the fire truck from the younger one, and I'm watching, and the younger one just winds up, slaps him right across the face. And the older one starts crying. And so the older one is like, well, you hit me, I'm going to hit you. So he slaps his younger brother on the face. The younger one grabs a bag of wooden blocks and just conks him right on the head.
Oh, no.
And this was probably 7 or 8 seconds. It was just back and forth.
Yeah,
it
goes fast.
By the time I got up and got over to them, the older one was about to use a wooden broom from his toy cleaning set to whack his brother. And I'm like, okay, now I have to kind of step in. This is a little too much, but we're just sitting there. He's like, he hit me. And the other one is so much younger. He can't even say it. And it's but you taught him that hitting was okay, and now you're getting it back. And guess what? 2 or 3 months later, like, they don't really hit each other that much. Like, it happens, but it's a lot less than when I first started, because they
Mhm.
can actually verbally say, like, I wanted that toy. I want that toy. And then they'll come to me or my wife to, like, actually, for
Mediate.
mediate it. And it's like, okay, well, he had it first. You can play with it for 10 minutes and then you get to play with it, kind of thing. But, you know, they learn so quickly, but they start very early.
And emotions get fiery very fast.
Yeah.
And
And they're
that'll be for probably
dysregulated.
another yeah, that'll be for another conversation.
They
But
don't know how to handle their emotions. And one of the things we worked on with our older son, he had a lot of behavioral issues in growing up. So we actually put him into a birth to 3 program. So if your state has a program like that, essentially
early
it's like
intervention.
early intervention. And, we worked on a lot of his behaviors with him. And today you wouldn't even recognize that he was in it. But we actually read a lot of books that talk about your feelings. And it sounds mushy, but it really works. And one of the books that series we read is like the Spot of Feelings book series. And there's like the concept of sadness and happiness, confidence, peace. And, this weekend it really showed its dividends. And my son and I went to a bookstore, and at the bookstore there's a bearded dragon. And we would go to the bookstore for the last since he's for the last 3 years, we would go to the bookstore, check out the bearded dragon, say hi to it, and then like go and look at the books. On Saturday we went, and there was a memoriam sign on the terrarium because the
Mm.
bearded dragon passed away. And my son was just like, he was ready to cry. And so he's like, I don't want to talk about it right now. And so then we went throughout our day, and then in the evening he started crying. And he's like, Dad, I'm really sad that Puff, the name of the dragon, the bearded dragon, Puff the bearded dragon, he passed away. And so, he started talking about his feelings, like, I'm sad. And we talked about how, like, you can like remember the good things about someone or a pet. And that, yes, he was a well-loved animal. All the people around him loved him, and that, he's gone now, but we can remember those things. And we read The Spot of Feeling Sadness, and it talked about how, like, other people can make you feel better when you're feeling sad, and that you should talk about your emotions. And he actually talks about how he's feeling now. He'll indicate, like, well, this is how I'm feeling and this is why. And for a 4-year-old, that's like
That's
really,
pretty impressive.
really
My
hard.
kids don't even necessarily do that.
I didn't know how to do that as an adult. It took
Yeah,
me
same.
learning with my son to figure out how to do that. So,
I agree.
it's never too early to start those things as well.
Yeah, I think that's amazing story about your son. I think the difficulty with my kids is sometimes, there's the concept of fight, flight, and freeze, and my older son tends to freeze. And like you said, it's great that your son was able to communicate, hey, I don't want to talk about this right now. Often my older son will just go nonverbal, and I have started to learn that, say, hey, okay, that's an acceptable response, but I would ask that we could at least talk about it later. And there's oftentimes he doesn't want to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
So what do I do? Do I push the agenda? Do I keep, and then it gets frustrating as a parent, because you almost feel like you're being ignored. And we don't always express that. We don't always explain and say why. So I try and take a lot of extra time and say, hey, look, I understand you don't want to, and that's fine, but you still need to find some way to communicate. And, one of our favorite shows, Bluey, there's the episode where I don't remember if it was Bluey or Bingo, and wants to get attention of the dad. And the dad was talking to a friend. They were going to the park,
Mm-hmm.
and just keeps interrupting the dad. The dad's like, look, I'm talking to this person. They're our friend, and you can't just keep interrupting me. And I said, you need to go find a way to politely, let me know that you're there. So he'll put his, Bingo or Bluey will put their paw or hand on the dad and just leave it there. And the dad will acknowledge and say, I hear you. I will come to you as soon as I can. And we actually implemented that. It's like, look, if you can't speak and you don't feel comfortable, you have to give some sign that you hear me or you understand you just need a minute.
Yeah.
It might just be to raise your hand. It might be to put your hand on me so I could feel you. I know your presence, and I understand and I can acknowledge. But sometimes you just have to wait.
Yeah.
That's difficult because, like you said, it's emotional dysregulation. It's being patient. It's knowing that, you sort of got to wait your turn, but you also have to be polite about it.
Yeah. And to your point, like, this stuff doesn't happen overnight, right?
Nope.
Like, this is it's all built in really small steps, right? Like each, talking about your emotions, trying new things, doing things around the house, sleeping, like none of it happens immediately. You have to work on it. And that is hard as a parent, right? It's not it, as a parent, you want like obedient kids, but you also want them to be
Be independent,
independent
to grow,
and to grow. And
be better versions of ourselves.
it sounds so difficult, right? Yeah, you want them to be better than you, but like if you make a mistake, like kids are very resilient, and
Yeah,
it's
I think
okay.
that's a good takeaway.
It's okay to make a mistake, and it's okay to even talk about it with your child,
Yeah,
because you'd be surprised at the things that they'll say to you, to say back to you. And it's like, wow, I didn't really even think about it that way.
yeah.
And it's definitely a long game. Parenting
It,
never ends, even when they become adults.
Yeah, I mean, I think full circle, this is really where we're starting to realize within ourselves, oh man, it was difficult for our parents. They didn't have an easy way out. There was no real internet. I mean, they could read books, but even then, if your parents' English wasn't their first language, maybe they didn't want to read or maybe can't really read, it's difficult.
Yep.
But, as we are getting older, we want to set a new trend. We want to be there for our kids. We want to be emotionally available. And just learn and grow. I mean, I think it has been very rewarding. I remember talking to an ex-manager, and as I was, I wasn't even married yet. I was going out with my wife. We were not, married and no kids. And he said, yeah, he has 3 kids, and is one of the most rewarding things in their life. But it is extremely difficult, extremely exhausting. But it really forces you to kind of learn more about yourself,
Yeah.
to be a better person. Not that a non-parent can't discover these things on their own, but it really pushes you to the limit and forces you into
Yes.
situations that you would almost never otherwise have to deal with. When another life is dependent on you and you have to find an answer, which again goes back to just building the community, one of our earlier episodes, finding friends, not being
Venting
alone,
and
trying to get help.
yeah.
And just sharing, vocalizing, explaining. We're both in therapy. It's been super helpful. You just don't know how to handle these things. You don't even know how to express it.
Yes, and that's really important. Being able to just talk about things at the end
And
of the
how
day.
do you expect your kids to express it? And then
Yeah.
you get upset when the kid doesn't say anything. Well, where do they learn it from?
Yep.
So it's all about role modeling. It's all about trying to be that good influence and do the best you can. But it's a struggle.
Yep.
You know.
And that's kind of the point. It is a struggle, and they'll struggle, and that's the whole point. That's life. Life
Yeah.
is a struggle. They just need to know that they're loved while they're struggling.
Yeah.
Um
Great topic, and
it's
something that we'll go on for probably many
There's
other
so many
episodes.
things to
But
talk
yeah.
about, and as our kids get older, there's all kinds of new
Oh,
concepts that will come through. I mean, I know your kids are starting to
they're
approach
getting there.
teenager.
They're getting to the tween age.
It's
I
a
learned
totally
about that
different
term.
dynamic, from a 4-year-old.
Yes,
So, but
absolutely.
we've talked about a lot of things about parenting. It's interesting how similar we are, but also how different our upbringings are, and yet we are able to talk about a lot of these things and how different other people are.
Yeah.
And you really like understand, like, man, despite where you're from or your upbringing, there's so much to learn about parenting and how culturally people are different and how they raise their kids, like someone in Sweden or like someone in Asia, it's totally different, right? But
Yeah.
there's just so many different ways to go about it. So don't think that you've done something wrong, or you haven't tried this technique or whatever, right? Like
And if you're
chances
struggling,
are if
really
you're
honestly,
fine, I was gonna say chances are if you're fine, like your kids will be fine too.
yeah. But also, if you should also be intentional.
Yeah,
If there's type of relationship that you want to have, if there is, the type of family that you wish you could have, I would say even seek help. There's an abundance of help, even, free help, community groups, therapy, family therapy, marriage counseling, all these different things. Again, like you said, it's really difficult because we often probably didn't get this modeled when we were kids
oh
by
no,
any means.
no way.
But that doesn't mean that we can't, change the, generational, impact and deviate to where we want it to be,
For sure.
So I think that's key for us and what
Yeah.
we're always going to be pursuing.
We've talked a lot of stuff about parenting, and one of the things that I feel like is really important, a good takeaway is like, why don't if you have children like of a certain age, like you can let them try something that you would normally consider risky, but something that you within a reason of safety, like let them try it out. Let them push the boundary and try something new,
Yeah.
and let them be independent and see how they do and how you interact by not how you feel by not interacting and letting them make mistakes.
And see how they think. I mean,
Yeah,
one of the things doesn't have to be physical, doesn't have to be risk of, bodily harm and things.
exactly.
Something
Yeah.
that we've wanted to do also was with money. They say, hey, we have X amount of dollars for dinner. Go ahead and try and feed the family. And then it starts to see the value. Oh man, you just bought $100 of French fries. This is going to be a rough night. But they often have no concept of money. In our martial arts, every month they have a specific keyword that they have to learn. And I think this month was something like self-reliance or something, or independence or something. And they asked the kids, and this is my younger son. So he said, hey, some of the parents are invited on the mat. He really wanted me to join. I said, okay, I'm going to be a good dad. I'll try and do my best. So I showed up after a long day of work. I was exhausted, but we're on the mat and we did our workout and it was a lot of fun. It was great. And they say, hey, does everybody know what the word is? Like, yeah. So they shouted out. I said, what does it mean? And they say, well, being able to trust yourself and work on yourself and do things by yourself. They said, okay, great. How many of you, and these again are 6, 7-year-olds, how many of you know how to fold your laundry? And I look at my son and he doesn't raise his hand. How many of you brush your teeth without being told? I look at him and he's like, yeah. How many of you know how to cook? How do you know how to clean? How do you know to put away the dishes? He didn't raise his hand. And I was like, hey, man, look at your friends. All the other kids in the class. I mean, it was a mixed, responses and, kind of laughs
Yeah.
and things. But the fact is could he? He probably could. But also, as a parent, I don't give him enough opportunities to do it between me and my wife. And part of it is we want to give them a healthy life. But then also, we're not challenging them to push the agenda either because we just make it so easy for them. They don't even realize how lucky they got it.
Yeah, I mean, you're
just
coming from a place of love and caring, but
right.
it ends
But
up
then
getting in the
sometimes
way
you
of
pamper
them.
too much, 100%. They then grow up to say, well, why don't you just do everything? I was like, whoa. I feel like I've missed. I think I've missed the. I took the wrong path somewhere.
Yeah.
So, but yeah,
There's
great
so
episode
much.
though.
Yeah, there's so much to talk about. One of the topics that we always talk about at the end of the episode is our rabbit hole.
Yes.
What has been on your mind lately, Twiggles?
What is on my mind is this fun platform called Whatnot. For those that may or may not know, it's essentially like a live auction site, similar to eBay, but in real time, and oftentimes in rapid succession. Can even be considered in some aspects a form of gambling. Specifically, I've seen things. I believe the history of it. I did a bunch of research. The history of it was around, I think, the Funko Pop toys, but then it evolved into other types of crafts and things. And then lately, for me, I use it for different kinds of trading cards. So there's Pokemon cards, there's Magic cards, and they just rapid fire sell these cards and get people to create a community, auctions, nonstop. It's interesting. It's a rabbit hole I don't want to get too deep into, so I'm being very careful. But it definitely consumes time. I'll leave it at that.
It sounds like a time sink and a potential money sink.
100%. If you are not in control of your money, I do not recommend it. It could be quite addicting. And seeing, wow, and then all of a sudden you realize how much money you just spent. And they often always say, hey, please spend with discretion. Make sure you are spending within your means. And if someone's posting an alert for that, this is going to be trouble.
Oh boy.
So yeah. What is your rabbit hole? Where have you spent a bunch of time thinking?
Mine is so much more boring than yours, but I'm a science guy. I like math, and so sometimes I'll read books on math. And one of the things that I started reading is this book called Mathish, and it's kind of like changing your mindset on learning math. A lot of people growing up have the mindset of math is hard, right? If you talk about trigonometry or calculus or, if you're into, statistics or matrix algebra and that kind of stuff, it all sounds like foreign concepts, weird stuff, right? But the idea of this book is to just essentially change how you think about it, and instead of math and hard science, it's math-ish, and
Cool.
seeing like the diversity of math and where it can actually be used and how it actually impacts your day to day, but removing the anxiety and trepidation that comes with it. And so it's an interesting book. And as I am learning more and more math, my kid is learning his numbers, and I'm already trying to tiger parent him into math. But I want him to be comfortable. I don't want him to be afraid of it. And so it's like, if this is a new way for him to learn something as well as for myself, like, why not? See where it takes me.
Sounds awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's critical. I mean, math and reading and English is not something you can get away with. I mean, you're going to be stuck in it whether you like it or not. So
Yep.
finding other creative ways to make it more fun. I mean, interesting thing on that, just a quick tangent, was in school, my older son, they introduced a gaming platform. At first, I wasn't really keen on it, but they essentially gamified learning math, very similar to Duolingo. And I still do it with my kids, and I'm practicing different languages. And, what my kid was given was this platform called Bottle. I think it was Boddle. And it's essentially like a matching game, but every time you match, you're trying to attack the other person. You have to do a math problem. And if you don't get the math problem right, you don't attack. So interesting stuff. It gets them to kind of trick them into playing.
Gamification.
Gamification, 100%. I mean, I think that's the absolute best way to get, especially me, because I know I'm a sucker for games. It's not even for anything, but the fact is, I'll play.
If you can get an achievement, you will get that achievement.
You put a nice little ding. That's all you need. It's just a sound effect.
This is a
Doesn't have to give me
dopamine
maybe
hit.
a shiny thing. Yeah, 100. Yeah, you know me well.
Well, that is our rabbit hole, and this is episode 12 of our podcast. And so one of the things that Twiggles and I have been discussing is where we want to take our podcast. And we decided that this would be the end of our first season. We have a lot of different topics that we've talked about and so many more. There's a lot of things that we want to do, specifically like, improvements, getting feedback from listeners, operational improvements, and just making the podcast better. And so what we plan to do is take a break and, gather our thoughts and come back strong with another season. One of the things that we definitely want to do is a lot more book reading, especially physical books, not just audiobooks. But one of the things we'd like to do is read a book together and then eventually talk about it on the podcast. Twiggles, I think you had a particular book in mind that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, there is one. So as perfect timing, as we talk about anxiety and things, something that kind of came across both of our desks was this book called The Anxious Generation. And it talks about, the new generations that are coming about, the impact of social media, of just being permanently connected to the internet and devices, and how it's influencing our kids, and almost getting completely subjected to it, without knowledge and awareness of the impact. It's a scary idea. But I do think it's really important for us as our kids are getting older, especially my kids are getting to that age where my older son is moving to middle school soon. And yeah, very interested. I think it's a great idea for us to start. So this will give us some homework. We'll set a milestone, make sure we accomplish this. I can't commit. I did borrow the book from the library. This is the first physical book I've had. I was very excited that I finished the intro, which is about 17 pages. I had to go back to it and reread the same page probably 5 times. It took me way too long. So I may have to go to the audiobook, but I tried. So we'll see. But I think as we get into that, as part of the intro, which is kind of a sneak peek into our future season, because I'm sure we'll bring up parenting again.
Definitely.
It kind of challenges us to try and address this, and it's really interesting. I'll leave this for the listeners. Is in the anxious generation, the challenge is to help better our kids and how they grow. Is to, number one, have no smartphones before high school. Number 2 is to have no social media before 16, to have phone-free schools, and to basically have more unsupervised play and childhood independence, which I think you're already doing. I try to do, but maybe not so much. But Not to say this is the perfect answer, but I think they're all reasonable things that I do agree with that will hopefully set us up for success. So I'm interested in the book. I love the idea also. We're going to really kind of read this together and see and challenge ourselves and see what we can learn, and we can bring it back to our listeners.
Yep, there's a lot of really cool stuff we want to do for the next season. So, stay tuned. Life is messy. Parenting is hard, but, keep at it, keep growing, and keep moving forward.
Yeah. Well said. Fantastic time. Looking forward to the next season.
Yep, definitely.
All right. Take care.
Take care.